You are now listening to the Dual Position Podcast.
The boys are back to talk all things SuperCoach all season long.
Please welcome your hosts, Whisperer and Brew.
We are getting to the very pointy end of the team reviews. None more pointy and at the top of the table than it comes to the Sydney Roosters. This dickhead next to me's favourite team, unfortunately. So we're going to hear a lot of bias, I feel like, this episode today about how good they're going to be. They're going to go 24-0. They're going to win the grand final 60-0. Tedesco's going to score 100 tries this season and be named Mr. Universe. As always, joined by the Roosters fanatic, Brew SC. How are we, mate? And how excited have you been to do this podcast?
I'm definitely excited to do the podcast, but I don't know if I'm going to say any of the things that you just said. I don't believe any of those things, to be honest with you, but I do think they're in for a very good season. I'm very excited to watch them play this season and bring on round one, really.
As much as I had a joke with you to start with, I have the Roosters finishing in the grand position of first, taking home the minor premiership once again. Where do you have them finishing, mate?
I've got them finishing second. I still think the Panthers are the team to beat. They have been for the last two seasons. So I don't see much changing. I just see the Roosters closing the gap on the Storm and the Panthers. And I think they'll probably be neck and neck with the Storm. But ultimately, I've got them just ahead, finishing second. Closing
the gap indeed, because last year they finished fifth. They finished 16th and 8th, but I think fifth is a huge success based off what the Roosters had to go through last year. I mean, I don't think Trent Robinson fielded his best 17 all year, I think it's fair to say.
Maybe rounds 1 or 2, but outside of that, definitely not. That was last season. I was probably more proud of the Roosters than I've ever been in my life. I've seen them win a lot of premierships, and that's a different kind of pride. Last year was heart and soul by them. To finish fifth with the roster that they finished with and the injuries that they sustained over the course of the season was phenomenal. They made the second week of the finals, and, you know, that was all they were ever really going to make, in my opinion. And I was really proud of the efforts last season, and I hope that they're built off of the back of that last season. And that's why I've got them, you know, moving up back into the second this year. They've got their big guns back. Hopefully they get rid of that injury curse and just go back to the 18-19 form that saw them go back to back.
Subtle little flex there, mate. I've seen them win plenty of premierships. Whatever, you try hard, mate. Last year they finished 8-4 away from home, so they finished 16-8 with 16 wins, 8 losses, 8 wins, 4 losses, both away from home. They put up the 5th most points with 26.2 points a game. They also conceded the 5th best defensive record with conceding 20.3 points a game. And they finished in 5th, as I said, on the ladder. So very, very consistent. I see that creeping up. The defense did worry me a little bit, conceding nearly 20 points a game, but that was the 5th best side. I think Parramatta were the only side better than them below, and Manly maybe conceded a couple of more points extra. So they were thereabouts. The gains and losses, mate. The gains, they've included Renouf Atoni from the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, Paul Momirovski from the Panthers, Kevin Aguama from St Helens, Ronald Volkman from, I'm assuming, just New South Wales Cup.
Upgraded.
Yep. And Connor Watson from the Newcastle Knights. When it comes to the losses, mate, I forgot that you even had Dale Copley on the roster. He'd retired. Boyd Cordner retired. Jake Friend retired. Brett Morris retired. Josh Morris retired. Matty Cavallo went to the Sharks. And Isaac Liu went to the Titans. Bit of a retirement home down at Bondi there last year, mate.
Yeah. Injury-forced retirement for 3 of those blokes. So, yeah, it was a crazy season to see, you know, Friend and Cordner and B-Moz all retire within the space of, you know, 4 to 6 weeks. And in the middle of the season, it was nuts to see, you know, all 3 of them in their own right, legends of the game. Brett Morris in particular, heart and soul. I love that bloke so much. And when he went down, I went out and bought a customized Brett Morris jersey in the sky blue. And, you know, I still don't wear it to this day because it's just, I bought it just to, you know, show my support to what a legend he was.
Yeah, mate, we've both been through heartbreak. You had Brett Morris go down, and I had Luke Brooks re-sign a new contract. So, you know, we're both in the same boat when it comes to heartbreak with our clubs. Mate, when it comes to the inclusions, I really like the inclusion of Renouf Atoni. Probably going to go under the radar for most casual NRL fans, but I feel like he provides so much, and he showed really good glimpses of promise at the Bulldogs, and I really, really like the pickup. It's just another one of these signings that the Roosters managed to make. You would have signed him on unders, and you'll develop him into a superstar.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of when we picked up Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, who went on to play every other game of his career and will probably finish his career at the Roosters. So hopefully Renouf can go down the similar path to what JWH did. He's definitely a good pickup. Not sure where he fits in the 17 yet, to be honest. I think 15 positions of this lineup kind of speak for themselves. There's a couple of asterisks on a few of them, which I'll mention when we go through the lineup. But I think there's a lot of guys fighting for 2 spots, and we'll just have to see who wins those final 2 spots.
Another one of those guys fighting for one of the spots is Paul Momirovski, premiership winner now coming from Penrith, so a bit of experience there. Bounced around from the Tigers to the Storm to Penrith, never really found a home, but it looks like no better spot to call your own than being in Bondi. I really like the Paul Momirovski pickup. I also like the Kevin Naiqama pickup. I don't really think he will feature a huge amount, but he's a very, very good hand to have, very experienced, can help a lot. I mean, played for the Tigers, played for the Knights, I'm pretty sure as well. Then went off to St Helens and absolutely killed it in the Super League. So he's come back with a bit more experience, a bit more big game presence as well. So another good signing from him. Ronald Volkman, we talked him up on the trials review podcast, mate, about how good he was, and maybe he's 1 or 2 injuries away from getting a spot if Luke Keary decides to hang up the boots and Robbo doesn't want to go down the Drew Hutchison route. Maybe there's a spot for Volkman to stand up in the halves. But probably the biggest signing would be Connor Watson coming back from the Newcastle Knights after spending a bit of time there. Obviously, a Roosters junior as well. I think he's a Roosters junior. Yeah.
Yep.
I
you also should have noted that Paul Momirovski is coming home too, because
I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that Paul Momirovski was a Roosters junior. I knew that Connor Watson played his junior footy with the Roosters. I wasn't sure if he was an actual Bondi junior, but yeah. So you've got Paul Momirovski coming back. You've got Connor Watson coming back, but yeah, Connor Watson's the biggest signing in this batch by far. The form that he showed last year, I think he kind of not revolutionized, but like, you know how people looked at the bench position as a stigma about being like, oh, I'm on the bench. I think Connor Watson brought that sort of 14 role into the mainstream eye and really showed that like how much of an impact you can provide your side by being a very, very good versatile 14 that can cover a multitude of positions and can be a real asset for a lot of sides. And I feel like that's exactly what the Roosters have signed him for. And I feel like he's just going to go to another level and just be an absolute stud.
Yeah, Connor Watson turned the 14, which has typically been in case of injury type position. You know, you pick a hooker there in case your hooker goes down. And,
it's almost like
and so on and so forth.
It's almost like the 8th position, isn't it? Like the 14 now is a position in itself.
Yeah, and for me, it's the X Factor position. You put your X Factor player in there, and Connor Watson showed last year that he could be an X Factor coming on and playing still quite big minutes too for the Knights. And I think he'll probably get something similar at the Roosters this season. I think he'll probably end up playing about 50 minutes a game off the bench, obviously, and hopefully he can make a big impact because he can literally pretty much play anywhere 1 to 13, in my opinion.
I'm pretty sure he averaged 61 minutes a game at Newcastle, but some of that was skewed by playing 80 minutes in the halves. I think he was averaging around 53, 54 minutes coming off the bench and playing in that 9 or 13 role. So, yeah, definitely can see him there. Supercoach-wise, I think it's a bit of a trap. I don't really see a lot of value there. I feel like you're paying sky-high price for a guy coming off the bench, which can be quite volatile. Supercoach-wise, I'd leave him, but we'll touch on that when it comes to our top 13s. The losses, mate, Dale Copley, I think you've replaced him with Kevin Naiqama, just a good experience head. The good experience head with some depth signing. It's very, very hard to replace guys like Friend, Cordner, and both the Morris boys, but you've done the best you can in guys like Momirovski as well, and you've obviously got some good juniors coming through in Billy Smith and Joseph Suaalii, so hopefully they are the next batch of talent. In the back row, Boyd Cordner wasn't playing his best footy in the last sort of 24 months, but what he provides to the side, as well with the Morris boys when it comes to leadership, is exceptional, and all three of those guys are hanging around training, which is very, very ideal to have if you're a young winger or a young back rower, if you're one of the Butcher boys or you're Steely Tupanua. Plenty of worse options to have than Boyd Cordner looking over your shoulder giving you tips.
No, not at all. So Cordner, yeah, these guys blokes will still probably have a solid amount of time in the club. I'm sure, Trent's probably got him in the coaching aspect of the game. So I'm sure they'll be around the club a lot, and the juniors can take a lot from that.
I think just a bit of a tinfoil hat theory that, they were told by Big Uncle Nick, maybe, hang them up and we'll give you a nice little coaching contract to keep that income ticking over and free up some spots. So don't hate that at all. There's definitely worse coaches to have or worse mentors to have in the NRL. Hey, they've got a really good opening 5 rounds when you think of it. They've got the Knights at home, Manly at home, Rabbitohs away. Now you look at those 2 games and think, what do you mean, Manly and the Rabbitohs? But when it comes to Supercoach, those sides can leak some points, can't they? That screams of a 30-24 affair in both those games. And they have the Cowboys and the Broncos, look, both away from home, but I think the Roosters are good enough to navigate that away from home factor. So you've got the Knights at home, Manly at home, which could be a high-scoring affair, the Rabbitohs at home, which could be a high-scoring affair, the Cowboys and the Broncos. Not a bad opening 5 rounds.
Yeah, I'd personally hope we're 4-1. Worst case scenario at the end of that. I can see us losing to either South or Manly. I think we probably beat. See, here's the thing: South normally beat us the first game of the season. We normally beat them the second game of the season. For some reason, that's how it seems to go year in and year out against the Rabbits. But I think them being without Latrell that game might just edge towards the Roosters being the favourite. Round 2, Manly could go either way. We seem to have crazy high-scoring games. Even if one of our teams is in a rough patch, the outcome still ends up being 34-28 or something like that. So we could lose that one, but as long as, Tom scores 200 and Teddy scores 180 in that game, I can probably take one loss in the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, I've got you 5-0, but if you do go 4-1, I think it is to Manly in rounds 2. I don't really think South would pose an issue. Just matchup based, I do like you in that game. Latrell is actually back for that game, mate. So you might have mixed up your rounds. Latrell's back for that game because that's the grudge match against Joey Manu, which will get plenty of eyes.
Is that week 3? Is it?
It is, yeah, week 3. So plenty of eyes on the product there. Hey, you mentioned at the top of the show we've got probably 4 positions here that are up for grabs, and fullback is not one of them. James Tedesco picks himself. In my mind, still. God, it's hard to say. Like, if you're picking an Australian side, I think the fact that Turbo can play centre, you have Teddy in front. So, in my mind, he's still the Origin one and still the Australian one. It's hard to say he's the best fullback in the league anymore, but I still think he's probably the best fullback in a rep side.
Yeah, it's a good debate, Teddy versus Turbo. Who's the best fullback? They're different players, so it's hard to judge them completely. Tedesco, I think, is Australian captain, New South Wales captain, certainly. So I don't think you'd, say to him, tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, even though you're the captain, we're going to move you out of your favoured position. And
I don't know, mate.
Said,
Kurt Gidley, captain New South Wales off the bench. Maybe we'll get Teddy in the 14.
Yeah, that was Kurt Gidley, mate. He overplayed his hand for a long time for New South Wales. So I don't think we're comparing apples with apples there. So I think Teddy will be the fullback and Turbo being the more versatile of the two would probably fill another area of the backline, probably in the centres, I'd say.
Well, let's talk Teddy and his Supercoach stocks because we know what he can do. An absolute stud. Nothing to debate there. The question lies about the stem cell treatment on his knee. He's had it a couple of years ago and he came back fine. There's always got to be a little bit of a narrative, though, in the preseason. We've always got to get something. I'm still waiting for the Tedesco, for Teddy to release the photo of him goal kicking. You know, the one that surfaces every year, about a week before Teamless Tuesday, of Teddy just having a couple of shots and people thinking that he's going to goal kick. But no, look, Teddy is the guy. For me, though, Teddy is fullback 3 in my mind. I've got Teddy just behind Pap, and the fact that Pap's a tad cheaper. If both those guys are fit round 1 and I was picking one, I would go Pappenhausen. But yeah, if you pick Teddy, I'm not gonna begrudge you there. What do we think his average is going to be this year? Because I've got him at around, if everyone's fully fit, this is a big caveat, everyone fully fit, I've got him around that 95 area.
Yeah, Teddy, I was about to say 95. I think he could go anywhere up to 105, depending how the Roosters go this season. If they come first, as you think they will, and second, as I think they will, it stands to reason they're going to score a lot of points, probably be the highest scoring team in the competition. If that's the case, then that would lead to Tedesco naturally having a higher average. He wasn't fantastic last year, and I think he averaged somewhere in the 90s anyway. So there is a fair chance that he could push the 100 barrier. I would really love to see it. He almost did it a few years ago. Hopefully, Walker, Keary stay fit and build combinations with Teddy, and he can go the 100+ mark, it would make fullback really interesting position, because I think two other blokes will go 100+ average this year.
You mentioned Walker and Keary staying fit. I also think he needs Victor Radley to be there for a long period of this year season as well. I think Victor Radley really helps James Tedesco's game far more than what he's given credit for. So if the spine can stay fit, the Roosters can be anything. Look, let's touch on the 6 and 7, because they also picked themselves. We'll touch on Luke Keary and Sam Walker. Now, hot off the press, this hasn't been released yet, or it might be released by the time this podcast goes out, but Paul Morawski will not be goal kicking. From his own mouth, he's come out and said in an interview that has not been released yet that he is practicing goal kicking, but it's not a priority. So all signs point towards Sammy Walker. Now, Sammy Walker over Luke Keary, I'm definitely getting behind that when it comes to Supercoach. NRL Physio dropped a fantastic stat that no one, apart from Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, has increased their Supercoach average after coming off the back of an ACL. Now, I know that Luke Keary, his average is like 75 or something, but he's priced at about a 60. I think Luke Keary could be a Dally M contender in the actual NRL. I think Luke Keary for Supercoach, though, 62 tops, 63. He's always been the sort of 55 to 60 point guy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You're basically quoting what his averages were in previous seasons, and last year was a 3-game sample, so with a big ton in there. So I don't really know if you can take much stock from last year. Like, obviously, he got off to a good start.
Yeah, you guys,
it was a 3-game sample.
You guys battered Manly round 1 with no turbo, and then I'm pretty sure you tailed up someone in round 2 as well. And then you played South in round 3. Yeah,
I think it was the Tigers in round 2. Yeah,
probably
was.
Everyone tails up. But yeah, Luke Keary, mate. So I've got him pegged at about 62, 63. So a slight increase on his career average, but probably not the halfback that I'd be picking out of this Roosters system.
Yeah, I think he'll lead, but he'll also support, if that makes sense. I think he'll lead coming, from, say, the 20 and the 30, pushing into the red zone. I think that'll be Keary's area. I think he'll lead that area, but I think Sam Walker will take control when we're actually on the goal line, and he'll start taking over the plays when it comes to the infield. The kicks across, I believe that Walker will do the majority of the kicking. Short balls, sure. I still think that will be Keary, but anything long balls, I more so expect Walker to take the lead. I know he's been killing it in preseason practice, so it's going to be a big year for Walker. If he's goal kicking, then that certainly throws him into the halfback conversation for me.
Yeah, I think people, I don't know what's attracting people to Keary, and this was me too, so I'm not saying it's a bad pick, because I did this when I first built my side. Is it the fact that the 75 average in a 3-game sample last year, or do you think it's the duel, or do you think it's a combination of both that's dragging Keary in over Walker?
I think it was how good the Roosters looked in the 2.5 games whilst Keary was on the park. But at the same time, they were picking on the little kids at school, basically, and their opponents weren't really up to scratch at that time last season. The Roosters were on fire. They were just toweling them up. Were they on fire because they had all these guys on the park, or were they on fire because, simply put, they were a top 3 side more often than not, and they were playing, sides that were lackluster, like Manly minus turbo is a bottom 4 side, for example, and that's who they were playing at the time. And I think they played the West Tigers, really average to start last season. And I can't remember the other game where the injury occurred, but I think I can't remember who that was. I think people got a little bit carried away by the fact that they looked so good over those 3 games. But realistically, from memory, if you look at those scores, I think you'll find he had like a 120 or a 130 in round 1, and then he had like a 60 to 70, and then the next one was the injury-affected game, and I think it was sub 40 or something like that. So there's an inconsistency there, and I think there's always going to be an inconsistency with Luke Keary, and that's why I'm not as keen. I would much rather someone with a little bit of a safer floor that's not really going to hurt me, but still has a bit of upside that they can get those big scores.
You put up 86 points in 2 weeks, 46-4 against Manly in round 1, and that was 40-6 against the Tigers in round 2, and then round 3 you were dusted by the Rabbitohs 26-16. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to score big Supercoach points when you're putting up an average of 43 points in 2 rounds. So no wonder he had those big scores. And I definitely got caught in it. I think Luke Keary will be fantastic NRL wise. Like I said, I've tipped him as my dark horse for the Dally M. He could be a bolter when it comes to that. But Supercoach wise, I think Sam Walker has the higher ceiling. I think Sam Walker has the better floor, and especially if Sam Walker's goal kicking and they're putting up all these points. Another tick in the Walker camp, and I might even start with Sam Walker because of that. So something definitely to consider. Now, this is where it gets tricky because there's 2 backline positions. Brett Morris and Josh Morris both exited the club, and we need to fill those spots. Billy Smith, he's very, very highly rated. Paul Momirovski, he has just been signed after a premiership winning season. And Joseph Suaalii, who is the prodigy, the golden child, whatever you want to put it. There is mega raps on him. And obviously, you've just signed Kevin Nguama as well. So there's 4 pegs that have to fit into 2 holes. Now, what do we do? Because Kevin Nguama started his career in the centres and then gradually moved to the wing. Billy Smith is probably a predominant centre. Joseph Suaalii can probably play centre and wing, and Paul Momirovski can play centre and wing. I have ruled out Billy Smith. First and foremost, I have ruled out Billy Smith in that contingent. I feel like he is too much of an injury waiting to happen. He just seems to be in for a week, out for 3, and not too sure if he can ever put it together. I really hope he does because he's obviously a generational talent. So that leaves us with Nguama, Suwali, and Momirovski. I've leaned towards taking Nguama out, and in our best 17. This isn't round 1 because we know Joseph Suaalii probably won't be fit. Billy Smith probably won't be fit. I expect round 1 Kevin Nguama does start and he partners up with Paul Momirovski. But I think if we're picking the best side, Paul Momirovski plays left centre and Joseph Suaalii plays right wing.
Look, it's going to be interesting. I think the only person of the 4 that we're talking about, the 4 positions that we're about to talk about is Tupu. Tupu will be the left wing.
And Manu
can also play wing or centre or fullback.
I think if we're picking our best 17,
in this instance,
if we're picking our best 17, Manu was right centre. On paper, I think Manu will float. On paper, Manu will be listed at right centre.
I believe so too, and I think it comes down to this. It comes down to Momirovski versus Billy Smith, and it comes down to Suaalii versus Kevin Nguama. Now, for me, Suaalii has that wing spot, provided he's fit, and when he is fit, it is his wing spot. I don't think, for me, that one's not really up for debate. I think that it's Suwaali's position, and he'll get that first crack.
And therefore, he becomes must-have. 268k right wing for the Roosters. No debates about it. I'm not going to get into analysis. I'm not going to give you numbers. I'm not going to give you gut feel. You pick Suaalii on the right wing because Brett Morris averaged, 75? Blake Ferguson averaged 65. Matty Cavallo averaged 65. There is a consistent, and sorry, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but there is 3 different levels of talent there. Morris being the top, Ferguson probably being the second best winger in that list, and Ikevala being the third, and I think there's quite a big drop-off between the 3 of them, and they're with all 10 points within each other. The Roosters' right wing is hot property. Joseph Suaalii, 268k, non-negotiable to be picked if he is there.
I'd agree with that. He is racing the clock to obviously be fit for round 1, so I feel like it will probably be Kev that we'll see on that wing, or maybe Kev plays the centres and Joey Manu starts the season on the wing. I wouldn't be surprised to see that personally. I think I will probably, short of say Russell, for example, at 280 being available and me having a little bit of extra cash, I'll be carrying Suaalii. If he's not there round 1, I'll still be picking him.
Well, that was my next question.
I'm that confident that he will get that spot quickly.
That was my next question to you. So let's say Suaalii isn't fit in round 1 and Kev plays there. Do we pick Kev because maybe Suaalii has 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, Kev scores 2 tries in 3 weeks? You can't really drop him. And then what if it just turns into, shit, Kevin Nguama is playing really good footy and we're 10 weeks later and we've lost the price jump. For example, if you didn't go Nico Hines last year, you lost on him. Do you start with Kevin, run the gauntlet of him playing a month and then downgrade to Suaalii if that happens? Or do you carry Suaalii in Halves, because last year Suaalii was 180k. Carrying him was very different to carrying him now at 268k. What do we do between the Kev and Suaalii debate?
Personally, I'm not going Nikorima and I will be going Suwali. But I'm a little bit more of a risk taker in SuperCoach than most people. I will carry MPRs I won't, drop a bead of sweat about carrying 3 or 4 MPRs if it means I get an absolute gun side, because I know I'll just strategically trade to fix that problem throughout before the first buy round. I'll probably have full squad. It's a waste of trades maybe, but I'll take the points and the position on the ladder early season rather than chasing points. So for me, I like going that route. It makes sense to pick Nikorima if he's named. I guess we just need to get some type of information on Suaalii and when his ETA is to return. And I think Trent will give us that. He's a pretty straight shooter. He doesn't really tell too many fibs normally. He normally just says it how it is. And my mail is that it's Suaalii's position. So based on that, I'm personally picking Suaalii.
Let's say Trent Robinson says Joseph Suaalii will be back round 5. How much of a time frame do we give Kev, or Kevin Nikorima? Big fan of the show, Kev. How much of a time frame do we give Kevin Nikorima in our sides before we say, you know what, it's not worth it, we'll just carry Suaalii? Because my issue is Kevin Nikorima comes out and scores 7 tries in 5 games. And then, how do you drop him? But then again, Matty Cavalli also scored 5 tries when he was called in late and was dropped the next week as well. So how much of a time frame do we give Kevin Nikorima in our sides before we say, you know what, I'm just going to carry Suaalii?
Well, I guess it depends on the situation. You're talking about a known situation that it's around, it's a 5-round injury and it'll be back in round 6. And, that means you get 2 price rises and you also get, 5 weeks on one of the hottest wings in the comp. And in that case, it's a bird in the hand. I'll take the bird in the hand. I'll take Kevin Nikorima. I'll probably play him with some type of confidence in certain games. Maybe not against Manly or South, but the other 3, certainly I would. Because I know that come round 6, maybe he goes, but he's already had 2 price rises and he's probably made me a bit of money. And in the process, I sell him for 400 or 420 or whatever he is. And I go down to Suaalii and I've made some cash. So that doesn't bother me, but it's the unknown, which is a different situation, which is Kev gets it round 1 and we're told, look, Suaalii's close.
I just wanted to ask because I know that there's going to be people out there that have the exact same questions as the ones I'm posing, and I know that people want to get our thoughts on it. So, playing devil's advocate, we'll cover all bases there. I feel like if we know Suaalii's coming back, I wouldn't take 1 price rise because you do have rounds 2 and 3, which are tricky matchups. I think the tipping point is those rounds 4 and 5. So, I'd be leaning towards carrying Suaalii as well. But I just wanted to pose the question to you, mate, as to see where your head was at, and I think you and I have a similar thought process. So we have Suaalii locked down with 1 wing, and we have Paul Momirovski locked down for the left centre. The halves pick themselves in Walker and Keary. I think the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they also pick themselves. I've got Lindsay Collins, Sam Verrills, Siwa Takiaho, Angus Crichton, Satili Tupanua, and Victor Radley. The only change I think you'd have is if you played Waweer-Hargraves starting over Collins coming back from an injury.
I'll come back to that in just a sec. The Momirovski centre situation is quite interesting because word coming out of the camp is that Billy Smith is the favoured centre, but a bit like Suaalii, Billy Smith might not be ready, which puts a real question mark over Paul Momirovski for me. I personally would pick Momirovski over Billy Smith. I really like Billy Smith, but there's a long injury history there, and I would like to see them not rush him back into the side and get into play Reggies and actually get, some meters in the legs and show that he can show some type of longevity, because playing a couple of games and getting injured doesn't benefit the club at all. You've also paid Momirovski, big-ish bucks, over the course of 3 or 4 seasons that they signed him for. So for me, it makes sense to pick him. He's also a backup goal kicker. So if Sam Walker's under too much pressure and, he's spraying him a little bit, at least, you've got a real sharpshooter in the side as well. That's not TKO, who for me comes off the bench in my makeup here. So it's a real question mark for me.
On that Paul Momirovski debate, I'm putting the red line through Paul Momirovski at left centre. I'm also double redlining through him if he's not goal kicking. So he looked a fantastic prospect on the right wing goal kicking, but he's lost both those in both our sides. So I'm putting double red lines through Paul Momirovski.
I honestly was going to have a real hot take here. If he was the goal kicker, I was going to say that he was going to average 70 plus this season and be one of probably top
right
three
wing
centers.
I wouldn't
left center.
I wouldn't have put him at left centre. I'd look at J Moz as a sort of benchmark at 50 to 53 points a game. And I think Paul maybe adds 12 points, so that takes him to 65. So you're getting there, but I feel like right wing, he could have been there a lot higher. Goal kicking, like imagine Brett Morris goal kicking. I'm not saying Paul Moravsky is Brett Morris. Don't shoot me. Even Blake Ferguson. Like Blake Ferguson averaged 65 in the wing. Add goal kicking to that, and that would have been fantastic. Like I said, it's quite a spicy take to say on the left wing. I think it's not as spicy to say if he's playing left centre. I don't think it's as spicy as him playing right wing.
I think it's hella spicy to say at left center he would average 70 plus.
Oh, 100%.
I've never had him on the wing, so it's always been about left center for me with Momirovski.
All right, so forwards, I named, I think, a pretty traditional forward pack. The only change you would make is if you start Jared Waerea-Hargreaves over someone like Lindsay Collins coming off an ACL, or you start him over a CSC Takiaho who is exiting the club at the end of the season.
I do have Jared starting. I've got him in the number 8, and I've got Lindsay Collins in the 10.
Totally fair. And then I'm assuming we agree on Verrills at 9, Angus Crichton and Satili Chipanua in the back row, and then Victor Radley at 13.
Absolutely.
They all pick themselves.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk Supercoach stocks on Lindsay Collins, because I know that he has been thrown around in the forums, on the Facebook pages, in my DMs or whatever. I'm sure you've got a couple of questions about him too, mate. Lindsay Collins, round 1, I'm not keen on. I just looked at the way Trent Robinson used Victor Radley coming back from his ACL. His minutes dropped off dramatically. His productivity dropped off dramatically as well. I think there's better options. We've seen Paul Vaughan had a very good trial for the Broncos at a similar for the Bulldogs at a similar price. We saw AFB for a couple bucks extra, and I feel like there's probably more stability in someone like a Stefano if he comes back to what we know he can after a poor trial. I am worried that Trent Robinson eases Collins back in, gets some miles in his legs, and his minutes are down, his productivity is down.
Yeah, I completely agree. My bench actually has an extra forward coming onto the bench too, simply for the mere fact that I think that he'll be eased back minutes-wise. He may not even start the early rounds. I'm picking a best 17 here, so I've got him starting. But in round 1, he may very well come off the bench so that he's not facing the fresh forwards and he comes on and gets a little bit of an easier return. We'll have to see how he goes in his trial games. I think best 17, he's now a starter. But him being eased back in, it would make sense. He is very important to that club, and I don't think they want him to get injured and miss a full season again when – JWH hasn't got long left and TKO will not be there next season. So I think you need to protect your new leader of the pack. So I expect him to ease him back, and I don't think he's an option to start the season.
Every season, my desk raises an inch off the ground when I talk about CSC with Takiaho. For the first time, all 4 legs of my desk are staying firmly planted in my office bedroom floor. I am not keen on Takiaho this year whatsoever. Shown that he was a little bit fragile last year. He's leaving the club. Isn't goal kicking. The Roosters have not had a goal kicker for a good couple of years, and Takiaho has been there, which is what has made me keen. The fact that now we've got more options there. Takiaho, like I said, is leaving the building. He's going to lose money. He's just going to lose money, and I'm not keen.
Yeah, I've got him listed as my trap. I've got him and Jared listed as my trap because I really think that there's going to be a heavy rotation amongst the forwards this season for the Roosters. I don't think any of them are going to play bulky enough minutes to, and I'm talking front row forwards here. I don't think any of them are going to play any type of significant minutes to become a real Supercoach option. Maybe towards, the pointy end or mid to late season, you might see Collins start taking over as the leader of the pack and he might start getting the minutes, but I don't expect big monster minutes anymore from these other guys.
I wouldn't even be taking CSC or Takiaho in draft later on. I just feel like there's not enough upside to be taking him with a late pick in draft either. So be giving him a miss. Sam Verrills, no, not with Connor Watson on the bench. So giving that a miss as well. I'm not really going to go into that too much. So many better other hooker options. Let's touch on the back rowers, and let's touch on the good back rower first and foremost, Angus Crichton. Now, stud, absolute gun. We know what we're going to get from Angus Crichton. What is there else to talk about? There is no downside on him. We're not worried about minutes risk. We're not worried about productivity risk. He's done it for numerous years. The only red flag on Angus Crichton is he seems to be the first person moved to the centres when anything happens in the backline. And that seems to be the only problem, but he never starts in the centres. Like, for example, if there was an injury, and there was a centre spot free, Trent Robinson doesn't shift Angus Crichton to the centres next week, similar to someone like Connor Watson or a Kurt Mann that can fill in at halves, which kills their SuperCoach stocks. You know, like those versatile guys. It might be only for the game that you cop one bad score from Angus Crichton. But apart from that, mate, I really can't see any kind of red flags when it comes to Angus Crichton. Slam dunk.
With the rise of Egan Butcher and Connor Watson coming in, I think maybe the centres becomes less frequent, obviously, for Crichton. And as you said, it's only in the instance that there is a serious injury that does happen. A red flag, I suppose, is his judiciary history. But I'm not really factoring that in.
He breathed on someone and get 3 weeks.
Yeah, like some of those decisions last year, if you compare, with similar cases, were ridiculous. So new season, we move on. I'm not even factoring that into my thought process. Angus Crichton is in my side at the moment. I can assure you of that. I feel like last year, the Roosters overall had a poor season. They had a really disjointed season. They had different halves coming in and out, and all the same, he still managed to bang out massive base and beautiful B plus P. And I think he got 11 tries, I think it was, for the season. And if you can get 11 tries last season, what could he get this season? Could he get Dave Fafita type numbers and 15, 16 tries for the season? Like, sign me up. I will say this, though, and this, I guess, comes across as a little bit of a segue, but if you do want to save money, there is a genuine option that you do take Suaalii Tupanua as an alternative to going Angus Crichton. Obviously, you're going to save $240,000 off the top of my head, and there's just as much upside, especially with, both Walker and Keary being there. Walker's very good with the short ball. He reminds me a little bit of Daly Cherry Evans when he floats across and he gives that sharp short ball. I'm sure he's worked on that. I'm sure he's worked on his combinations. Suaalii started last year like a house on fire, and he kind of died in the arse a little bit in the last 6 to 8 weeks. But the Roosters were cooked by that stage. They were buggered for those last month of the season. You could see it. They were scratching and clawing their way just to get to the finals. So I think he's a real option. I've seen people talk about Koala. I've seen people talk about Olakau'atu. He's in that mix too, for me, 100% in that mix.
Yeah, so let's touch on Suaalii Tupanua, because at 482k at the time of recording, he's owned by 8% of teams. Very hot and cold. So last year, he played 20 games at 2RF. He had 9 scores over 70. He had 6 scores under 45. So rocks or diamonds play. When, 15 games? So 5 of those games fell between 45 and 70. Not overly consistent, but the 9 games above 70 does present upside. His average from rounds 1 to 19, Brew, was 69.2. His average from rounds 20 to 25, 38.2. That is a 31-point drop-off. That is huge. His base plus power is 47. He had 12 tries, 14 line breaks, 3 line break assists, and only 12 offloads for the season. It's that base and power that worries me, bro. Because if the tries do dry up, which you can't bank on a back rower scoring, 12 tries last year? That was more than Angus scored. And we know that Angus is a stud. So it's the 47 base power that does worry me. He's only 24 years old, Suaalii Tupanua, and with the full Rooster side back in the fold, including Keary, can he keep up the scoring, but can he improve his work rate? Cooper Cronk come out and said publicly that Suaalii Tupanua needs to link up with his outside men and his inside men better defensively, because that's probably a weaker part of his game. But he just doesn't get in, doesn't get stuck enough, and that's probably because you've got guys like Rhea Hargraves, Takiaho, Collins, Radley, and the guys that we're going to pick off the bench very, very shortly. Do we see a production upside? Like, do we see uptick in production? Because I don't think he's going to have this magical improve in base and power. I think we're relying on these 12 tries to get us similar numbers as to what there was last year. But no denying 69 average in the first 20 rounds last year is pretty impressive for a guy who's priced at less than 500k and is less than 10% ownership right now.
Yeah, absolutely. People are looking at Olakau'atu, and his numbers aren't even the same as what you just quoted. I didn't realize it was that close to being a 70. Look, if Cooper Cronk has come out and said that, I can guarantee Cooper Cronk has raised that. He obviously does work within the Roosters still. He works with the halves, and I'm sure he has many a chat to Trent Robinson. He's one of the smartest minds in football, in my opinion, Cooper Cronk. So if they're saying that, I'm sure they've had a chat to him and they've worked on that over the summer. And let's see if he gets an uptick. I would back him to get a slight uptick if Cooper Cronk has raised that.
Do we back him to score 12 tries, though, in 20 games?
Well, 24 games. So, yes, I would.
Oh, I've taken the stats just from him starting at 2RF. So he missed a couple. So that's 12 and 20. So that's a phenomenal try scoring record. I don't know if it's sustainable. Let me pose a question to you, Brew. So Tilly Supernova at 482k or Jason Tamalolo at I think about 480?
If I didn't have Angus Crichton already in my side, the answer to that question would be Suaalii.
Fair enough.
I would take Suaalii over Tamalolo, just because there's more attacking upside in the Roosters than there is the Cowboys, and obviously there is a shadow of doubt when it comes to that lineup and what Tamalolo's role in that lineup is moving forward. So I would feel probably a little bit safer on Suaalii's ceiling longer term. But given that I have Angus Crichton, I currently have Tamalolo. So when you said that, I was like, I better precursor this, that if I didn't have Angus,
you want a piece
I would pick.
You want a piece this Roosters back, like this Roosters edge defense.
100%.
But it's similar to the
and if I have to,
you go.
If I have to find money at any point, before the first game,
it's Angus down.
Let's say I need Turbo or I need Cleary or one of these things happen, then that move would likely happen. I would probably go down Angus down to Suaalii and hope that Suaalii can pretty much match Angus's numbers for 200k less.
Cool. I think it's very similar to the debate we had on the Cowboys back rowers. It's Nanai or Lukey. It's not both. Different price bracket when it comes to Angus and Suaalii. But I think the same principle can be applied. Hey, let's talk Victor Radley. One of my favourite players in the comp. I labelled him as a buy on my Instagram a little while ago, and a lot of people slam me for that. What impressed me, though, with Victor Radley is the way he came home last year, off the back of him recovering from his ACL injury. Look, last year only averaged 50.4, played 14 games, averaged 62 minutes a game, so keep that in mind. His minutes per game post-Origin, however, so this is when I feel like, he's got the miles back in his legs a little bit, the ACL starting to hold up, Trent Robinsons starting to get more confidence in him. He went from, his season average was 62 when it comes to minutes per game. He was averaging 71.6 minutes a game post-Origin. So we can expect his minutes pre-Origin to be around that 53, 54. So he's had nearly a 20-minute uptick in minutes, and his average post-Origin was 65. So that's a 15-point increase from his regular season average as well. I don't know if that's him coming home with a wet sail, him coming home because the Roosters had no troops and Trent Robinson needed to play him big minutes, or if that was him recovering from the ACL injury that he come off the back of. People can say, oh, Victor Radley's a maniac, he's going to get suspended, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. He is, 441k? If he was available at hooker this year like he was last year, I'd be all over him. The problem is he did lose hooker, so he's 2RF only. But I think there's definitely a case to be starting with Victor Radley.
Yeah, but anyone that's saying that Victor Radley is a maniac, you can't start him. I asked the question, have you got Tavita Pangai Jr.?
Exactly.
Because he's hot property this year, and I bet you've got him. Look, Radley, I think it's a combination of all the three, but I find it really hard to trust the last 8 weeks for the Roosters last year when it comes to SuperCoach and things like that, because they were that battered that every week was a lottery. Some weeks they had no bench or they had 15 men like at some point during the game, and it might have just been that he was the last man standing. Like he was one of the only guys left that had any type of experience or leadership in that side, so that he needed to be out there for 70 minutes to coach the young guys around the park.
Remember when Jared Rea-Hargraves played like a month straight of 80-minute games?
This is what I mean, like, and I bet you Jared doesn't want to be playing 80 minutes at this stage of his career every week. But it was just needed by these guys, and they had to really, I guess, nurture and baby the young kids, because they were boys against men at this stage. The Roosters were a big side, and they were trying to hold on to their top 4 spot at that time. And, some of the leaders stood up and played big minutes. I think TKO was playing 60 plus minutes quite often too. So I don't mind the shout, to be honest with you. I hadn't really looked into the numbers. I certainly don't hate the idea of picking Radley. I personally think Radley's a little bit like Cameron Murray, and he's one of those guys that you can really look at, during or post Origin, because he seems to come home with a wet sail. And that's probably, if I was to go down that route, that's probably when I would do it over starting this season with him.
I just look at that 441k and it's just like, it's so tempting. And we know how good of a ball player he is through the middle. And we know that Tedesco loves to follow him. And it does entice me because of the 65 average he came home with last year. And at 441k, there was huge value there, considering he is priced at a 50 average. So what's that, 15 points if he can find that form? Even still, do we think there's 10 points of value in Victor Radley? So he's priced at an average of 50.4. Do you think even if he starts the season, his average is around that 60 mark?
60, yeah. But
well, that's what I'm saying. That's 10 points of value there because he's priced at an average of 50.
Yeah, fair enough. Do the Roosters play the first bye? Because I have a real strong feeling that Radley's going to be probably number 17 this year for the Blues.
Yeah,
so that's a bit of a downer for me too.
Yeah, if Radley's fit, he still is one of the best 13s in the game, so he would be there. When it comes to the buys, the Roosters, they do not play the first bye. So they have the week off in week 13.
Cool. Let's talk about the benches.
No, they don't. I cannot read. They play the Raiders in round. They play the Raiders away 13. From home in round 13. They do. Sorry about that. That's let's talk about the benches because one of them picks themselves, and that's Connor Watson, who is my biggest trap with this Roosters side when it comes to SuperCoach. I think Connor Watson's fantastic. He's one of my favourite players in the last 10 years. I just think we saw the absolute best from him SuperCoach-wise at the Knights. And I think Trent Robinson probably just takes 5-6 minutes off his game time. I don't really think the PPM changes a whole lot and probably loses 6 or 7 points when it comes to his SuperCoach scoring.
He's just a wait and see for me. I need to see how he's used. And if he's been used in a special way, then I'll look to get him in. But I personally feel like he'll be priced at roughly what he's worth, and therefore he won't really be an option.
Hey, touch wood. That Sam Verrills goes down tomorrow. I'm all over Connor Watson. I'm all over Connor Watson, but
cut that out.
But yeah, like if he got a starting spot and he got good minutes, yeah, cool. I'd be straight on him because we know what he can do in big minutes. But I just think there's too much of a logjam. Hey, I mean, to be fair, we did say that about Jaden Brayley. We said touch wood, nothing happens to Jaden Brayley. Chris Randall could become relevant, and then we all know what happened there. So. Look, hopefully nothing happens to Sam Verrills.
I'll remember this when we do the West Tigers pod.
Hey, mate, curse us all you want. I don't care. I'm done. I might be a Redcliffe man next year. Who knows? But yeah, Connor Watson's one of my biggest traps. But I still think he's one of the best signings that the NRL have made. It's funny how that can happen, isn't it? When it comes to SuperCoach in the NRL, how we think Luke Keary could disappoint a lot of people, but I've tipped him as a dark horse for the Dally M. And I think Connor Watson's one of the best signings that's happened this offseason, but I still think he's one of the Roosters' biggest traps. So it's funny how that works. I'm assuming Connor Watson is your 14 as well. I'll do a backflip on camera right now if you say he's not.
No, he's my 14. And given that I'm starting JWH, that makes TKO my 15.
I have JWH as my 15, but they are very interchangeable, which is totally fair. I think this is where...
Already discussed both of those. This is where we'll have a couple of differences, I think.
Now, you've seen my team, because I did send it to you before, because I want to make sure I didn't forget anyone. I haven't seen yours. So I have run off a 20.
I've already forgotten yours.
I have run off a 20 as my 16. I think he's a good middle that can provide a fair bit of impact. I've already spoken him up highly enough. Now, number 17 was interesting. Do I go with a middle? Do I go with an edge? I've gone with one of the Butcher boys, and it's not Nat. I've gone with Egan Butcher as my 17. I feel like he's the better player out of the two. He can provide a bit more versatility than that. And I just really like the way Egan Butcher goes about his game. Probably won't start, but I hope he does because I want to see him play big minutes. Another one there who played well in the trials is Daniel Saluka-Fafita, another year older, another year wiser. He did get a bit of a crack last year in first grade too when it came to the injuries. Didn't really impress me much last year, to be honest, Brew. But did look good in the trials. So there's a couple of names to throw up there.
The Roosters got a couple of kids coming through that are actually quite good. And I think last year it was, like I said, it was turmoil.
They were thrown to the Wolves. And
they were thrown to the
kids.
Wolves, and they didn't really step up. Like, they did an okay job, but we didn't see the best of these guys by any means. I actually have Saluka-Fafita in my 17. I've got him as the 17. For the reasons I stated earlier, I think they'll carry an extra bench forward, just because Collins is coming back from a serious injury. TKO's getting a little bit older. Jared's getting a little bit older. They're both Jared might retire at the end of this year for all we know, and TKO's leaving the club. So they need to start bringing through some forwards. And for that reason, I think Luca Fafita's probably the best one of them. But also, I don't know how to say his first name. It's like, I think his first name's either Nathaniel. They call him Nathaniel, but I think it's Nafua.
Yeah, Nafua
White.
White. Yeah.
White.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's really talented. So he could put his hand up at some point to kind of challenge Fafita for that. And the other one is Tafua Hua or Hua Tafua, something like that. He's got a hyphen surname. He's really talented too from the juniors. They're probably the three kids coming through the ranks that I really like. But for now, in the 17, I've got Fafita. I also have Egan Butcher. I've got him moving up to the 17 this year, even as a full strength side. And I do have a bit of a Mark Waugh, Steve Waugh situation here, and he's kind of displacing his brother. And I love Nat Butcher, and Nat Butcher's actually, it's either 3 or 7 games away from 100 games in the NRL and 100 games with the Roosters.
Jesus Christ.
I just think
I feel like he's just been plodding along for so long then. How's he got 100 games? Wow.
It's really funny. He's got 2 premierships. He's played that many games. Even though he hasn't really started, he's always been on the bench for the Chooks for 3 or 4 years now.
So you've got no love for Big Renoff for Tony?
I love Nat Butcher, but I just... Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say Butcher. I love Nat Butcher, but I just don't know. I think his brother's better than him. And with Connor coming into the club, I can't see TKO playing Reggie's, to be honest with you. He's still got to be in their best 17. He's a machine. He's an aging machine, but he's still a machine. So he's just a victim of circumstance. Tony's my 18. I think he's a really handy player to carry as an 18th man. And now that they name 18 players and you can use the sub and stuff like that, I just felt like he was really suitable. Nat Butcher would be as suitable as well. Like you said, ball playing middle forward, super talented. I'm just not sure if signing with the Roosters from the Dogs means that you get a start from day one. In the start in the 17, that is.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I had a mouthful of water as you cut to me. I don't know. I've got a big. I won't say harder. It's a semi. I've got a semi for Renoff for Tony. I feel like he could be anything. He's 26, so he's entering probably some of the best years that he can.
Yeah, that
be
means
as
he's
a middle.
mature though, which is fine. We'll see. You could be right. I could be right. We could both be wrong. It's really hard with these last 2 spots. Like Butcher and Fafita from my side, they could both miss out.
Yeah,
they could pick Nat Butcher and they could go and pick, Nathaniel Wright or White or whatever his last name is. We don't know.
Yeah, definitely interchangeable.
We'll have to see.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for Teamless Tuesday. Mate, let's go here wrap up the Roosters preview. You mentioned your traps and your X Factors and whatnot. Run us over them before we finish up today.
So got him finishing seconds. I did have Momirovski as my X factor, but given that you announced about the goal kicking, I'm going to change that to Teli Tupanua because I am really high on him to be a real big mover this season. Biggest stud, obviously, it's James Tedesco. I'll give a shout out to Sam Walker, but I think he's going to be in the top 5 halfbacks this season and could definitely push the top 3. Traps, I've got the forwards. I wouldn't be touching any of the front row forwards until much later in the season. And the only one I would touch would be Lindsay Collins.
All right.
Just before we go, I will say Adam Kieran, I still think that bloke might be a shot at playing some top of 17 role for the Roosters if they play the route of Connor being a forward and not so much of a 14.
I'll make a proclamation on air. I have Nathan Cleary on my side as we speak. If Nathan Cleary is not fit for round 1, your boy will be starting with Samuel Walker. You heard it here first. I'm probably going to go back on that promise in the next week. But for now, my plans, if Cleary isn't fit round 1, we will be starting with young Samuel Walker, provided he gets the goal kicking tee. I have been the SC Whisperer. You have been listening to the Dual Position Podcast. I have been joined by that man, Brew SC22. He goes all right at SuperCoach. Finished 100th last year, apparently. Not too sure if he's told anyone yet. But thank you very much for listening to this podcast. What have we got next, man? We've got the Warriors, we've got the Tigers, and then we're into the real fun stuff. We've got Cheapy podcast coming. We've got Prediction podcast coming. Plenty of good stuff happening. Teamless Tuesday is getting very, very close.
Tuesday.
Very, very close.
All right, beauty. Well, that was a good chat. Up the chookies.
Yeah, whatever. Bye.